What we strive to do is to show to the world that flying V is a viable alternative to the tube and wing airplane that we're flying with now, and that it can be as safe but much more energy efficient.
Welcome to Disrupted. I'm David Pollard. The global aviation industry wants net zero emissions by 2050, an ambitious target and one it's unlikely to reach without major progress on new fuel technologies or without new thinking on new design. One radical step in that direction is this, the Flying V, a concept under development at Delft University in the Netherlands, and whose project leader is Professor Roelof Vos. Roelof, how dramatic a shift is this in terms of how we think about passenger aircraft?
If you look at airplanes that have been around for the last 15, 60 years that we've accustomed to flying with, they all look pretty much the same. It's a tube with two wings, and the Flying V is dramatically different, where all the passengers are actually located in the wings together with fuel and freight. So it's quite a disruptive technology compared to what we have.
In 2020, aviation emissions accounted for 2.5% of total global emissions. That figure rose to nearly 3% as early as 2023 and is expected to triple by 2050 as the demand for flying soars. So the environmental argument for the Flying V is, say its developers, a simple one. Less air resistance as the aircraft flies, so-called drag, means less energy to make it fly, and therefore less fuel.
A flying wing tries to transport the same amount of volume, but with a much smaller outer skin, basically. So we have less surface area that is in contact with the flow, and that generates the drag. That's one of the things. The other thing is that we distribute the weight over the span of the airplane, and that leaves us with a much more efficient structure. And the third thing that we do is that we don't have a vertical tailplane at the back of the airplane, but we merge that with these large winglets, and they also reduce the drag of the airplane. So those three components are ensuring that our airplane has 20% less drag and therefore 20% less fuel consumption.
Now, you've carried out a test flight of a prototype model. That was a couple of years ago. So how far have you moved since then? At what stage are you now with your research and development?
So currently we are focusing a lot on the flight control of the airplane. And these models are again used in our flight simulator. And what we're doing there is we're trying to come up with the flight control laws for the airplane and to make sure that the airplane is acceptable to fly, and maybe more than that, is pleasant to fly to pilots and intuitive to fly. And they get to practice a little bit because the airplane simply responds differently. And that's because we don't have a conventional tail. We are already at a stage where the Flying V can be handled very intuitively from a pilot's perspective and is actually quite easy to fly. And that's something that I'm actually quite proud of.
Comfortable pilots and comfortable passengers too, under ambitious plans for new cabin configurations and seating. Delft University has been carrying out simulations for how travellers will react to the different motion of the Flying V and for how to deal with emergencies. Both need more research, they say, but so far have thrown up no major issues. The biggest issue of all, says Roelof, is the challenge of the future. And if you were talking to a climate change skeptic, how would you convince that person that this was a crucial step in the right direction towards saving the planet?
The trivial solution is, of course, stop aviation altogether. But I don't believe that's a great solution because if you want to understand each other globally, you have to be able to interact with each other. So the only way that you don't kill aviation by forcing very expensive fuels onto the market is to make these airplanes more energy efficient, to make sure that they need as the least amount of fuel as possible. And therefore we need improvements in configuration design, like Flying V. We need lighter structures, we need better engines. And if you then combine all of these things, maybe alongside regulations or taxations, then it is possible to have both, to have clean aviation on the one hand and still have aviation.